Your body started drinking alcohol 65 million years before you were born. That sounds impossible, but the strange part is, it may be the exact reason millions of people still crave it today. Because alcohol didn't start with humans. It didn't start with civilization. It didn't start with the first brewery, the first vineyard, or the first clay pot of fermented grain. It started in the jungle, millions of years before your species had a name. And the reason you reach for a drink has almost nothing to do with taste, and almost everything to do with survival. But here's the question scientists couldn't answer for decades. Why would evolution build that in? Why would your body be designed, at the genetic level, to want something that impairs your judgment, slows your reaction time, and can kill you if you drink too much? Hold that question. The answer is coming. But first, you need to understand something that almost nobody knows. Deep in your DNA, there is a single gene that was upgraded, specifically, deliberately upgraded by evolution, hundreds of thousands of years before the first human ever walked the earth. A gene that made your ancestor's body 40 times better at processing alcohol. Not 2 times, not 10, 40. And it appeared at a very specific moment in history, a moment of crisis. But here's where it gets weird. The crisis had nothing to do with drinking. It had to do with forests disappearing. Around 10 million years ago, a climate shift began tearing apart the African continent. Dense continuous forests started fragmenting, breaking into patches, and the great apes who had always lived high in the canopy, feeding on fresh fruit, suddenly found themselves spending more time on the ground, around fruit that had fallen, fruit that had been sitting in the heat, fruit that had begun to ferment. This is the moment researchers Matthew Kerrigan and Nathaniel Dominy point to in their landmark 2015 study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Using a technique called Ancestral protein reconstruction, which allows scientists to actually recreate ancient enzymes from genetic code, they trace the evolution of a single enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase 4, ADH4, and what they found should not have been possible. Right at the moment the forest fragmented, right when apes were being forced to the ground and into contact with rotting, fermenting fruit, a mutation appeared in the common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. A mutation that made ADH4 40 times more efficient at breaking down ethanol. 40 times. Overnight in evolutionary terms. A fundamental biological upgrade. Your body did not adapt to alcohol after humans invented it. Your body adapted to alcohol millions of years before humans existed. The biology came first. The drinking came later. But that raises a question nobody expected. If the biology came 65 million years ago, and the upgrade came 10 million years ago, when did humans actually choose to drink for the first time? When did it stop being accidental and become intentional? Scientists thought they knew the answer. They were wrong. The old story said it happened around 5,000 years ago, with the rise of agriculture, with surplus grain, with the accidental discovery of fermentation in stored food. Logical, tidy, almost certainly incomplete. Because in 2003, archaeologists excavating a site called Hajji Firuz Tepe in the Zagros Mountains of modern Iran found chemical residue inside ancient clay pottery, the molecular signature of tartaric acid. In that concentration, in that context, tartaric acid means one thing: wine. Intentional, deliberately produced, sealed, and stored wine, dating to 7000 BCE, 9,000 years ago. This was not an accident. The pottery was sealed. The wine was being kept. Someone had learned to make alcohol on purpose and had decided it was worth preserving. But the strangest part was still ahead. Around the same time, on the other side of the world, in China's Yellow River Valley, biomolecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania was analyzing pottery fragments from a site called Jiahu. What he found was a 9,000-year-old fermented mixture of rice, honey, hawthorn fruit, and grape. A deliberate, complex, multi-ingredient recipe. Not one ingredient fermenting accidentally. Multiple ingredients, combined intentionally, sealed in pottery 9,000 years ago. This was a recipe, the oldest known alcoholic recipe on Earth. And then Egypt, and Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. The same pattern again and again, independently. Humans separated by thousands of miles, with no contact with each other, all inventing alcohol at almost the exact same moment in history. All of them within a few thousand years of each other, figuring out fermentation and making it central to their civilization. Why? Every culture, every continent, the same invention, the same priority. Why? Scientists thought the answer was safety, and they were right, but only partly. In the ancient world, water was lethal. Rivers and standing water were contaminated with pathogens that killed people, especially children, regularly and without warning. Alcohol, even in low concentrations, is antimicrobial. Beer and wine, fermented in sealed containers, were genuinely safer to drink than local water. Not culturally preferred, literally safer. A cup of ancient Egyptian beer was, in many situations, a better survival choice than a cup of river water. Children drank it. Soldiers drank it. Slaves drank it. The workers who built the Egyptian pyramids received documented beer rations of 4 to 5 liters per day, per person, per day, not as a reward, as nutrition. Ancient beer contained significant calories, B vitamins, and minerals that were difficult to obtain elsewhere. It was food in liquid form. It was safe water. It was medicine. Scientists thought that was the answer. It wasn't, because in 2012, anthropologist David Dietrich and a team of researchers made an argument that turned the entire story of human civilization upside down. The standard story says agriculture came first. Humans settled, grew grain, stored it, and then accidentally discovered fermentation as a byproduct. Logical. But Dietrich's argument is the opposite. He proposes that in at least some cases, alcohol came first, that the desire to produce fermented beverages was itself a motivation for cultivating grain, that the drive to make beer may have been one of the forces that pushed nomadic foragers to settle down, to plant, to harvest, to store, to build civilization. This is the beer before bread hypothesis, and while it remains contested, the evidence from one specific site makes it very hard to dismiss. Göbekli Tepe, southern Turkey, one of the oldest known temple complexes on Earth, built by people who were not yet fully agricultural, who were still partly nomadic, who had no cities, no writing, no wheels, and yet they built massive stone structures with precise geometric carvings, organized labor, and long-term coordination. And inside its stone vessels, researchers found chemical residue consistent with fermented grain. Not bread, not porridge, something fermented, something intentionally alcoholic. At the very dawn of organized human society, the people who built the first temples may have been gathering to drink beer inside them. Everything you just heard makes sense, until this next discovery, because here is what nobody expected. Alcohol's role in early civilization was not just practical. It was not just about calories or safe hydration. Across every culture that independently discovered fermentation, alcohol immediately became sacred. In ancient Sumer, there was a goddess dedicated entirely to beer. Her name was Ninkasi. The oldest known recipe for beer, inscribed on a clay tablet around 1800 BCE, is not a brewing manual. It is a hymn, a prayer written to her. Sacred text and recipe, inseparable on the same tablet. In Egypt, the god Osiris was said to have taught humans to brew beer. In China, alcohol was poured as offering to ancestors. In ancient Greece, wine was the domain of Dionysus, and drinking it was a form of temporary communion with the divine. Every culture, every continent, independently, the same pattern. Alcohol and the sacred, inseparable from the beginning. This should not have happened, yet it did. And the reason it did brings us back to your brain, right now. Because when your brain processes alcohol, something very specific occurs. Dopamine is released. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for social inhibition, self-monitoring, and the constant low-level anxiety of living in a social hierarchy, goes quiet. The barriers between strangers lower. Warmth spreads. A temporary sense of belonging appears. In small doses, in social contexts, it does something that was genuinely valuable. It made strangers trust each other faster. It allowed groups of unrelated individuals to bond more quickly. And in a world where forming alliances was survival, where trade networks and military cooperation required social trust between people who had never met, the ability to chemically accelerate that trust was not trivial. Evolutionary biologist Robin Dunbar studied exactly this. His research shows that drinking together triggers the same neurochemical pathways as grooming, laughter, singing, and storytelling. The same endorphin release, the same bond formation, the same feeling of being part of a group. Alcohol, in this framework, is not a vice. It is a social technology, one your ancestors stumbled onto, refined, and built civilizations around because it worked. But the strangest part of this entire story is not the biology, not the archaeology, not the neuroscience. It is this. You are still running that same program, right now, in the 21st century, in a body that was biologically upgraded for ethanol tolerance 10 million years ago, in a brain that was wired to find fermented fruit rewarding 65 million years ago. Every craving, every sense of warmth after the first sip, every feeling of belonging in a crowded room with a drink in your hand. That is not culture. That is not weakness. That is a 65-million-year-old circuit completing itself. From the jungle floor to the clay pot at Hajji Firuz Tepe, from the hymn to Ninkasi to the stone vessels at Göbekli Tepe, from the pyramid workers drinking their 4 liters in the Egyptian sun to wherever you are right now. The same pull, the same ancient reward, the same question your nervous system has been asking since before your species existed. Where is the food? Where is the safety? Where is the group? It found the answer before you were born. You have been carrying it ever since.